The monastery receives this. Now, for most of you, you're looking at this going, it's the Madonna of the Rocks, but it's not the Madonna of the Rocks. What happened? Well, what happened is it was repainted by someone who wasn't a master artist. When people talk about what makes a masterpiece, it's kind of like listening to people talk about like fancy wine or fancy food. They start talking about things like a hint of vanilla with cranberry overtones and an underbelly of prune. And you're going, dude, what are you tasting? Artwork sometimes comes off the same way. What on earth are these people talking about when they talk about a masterpiece? What characteristics make something really good as opposed to kind of crappy? Well, the easiest way to explain that to you is to show it to you. For most people, when they look at the two paintings side by side, it's pretty easy to tell which one Da Vinci did and which one his assistants did. What's the big dramatic difference? Well, there isn't just one big difference. There's a lot of little ones. And when you add up all those little ones, it's pretty obvious. The painting on the right, the one the assistants did, the background isn't right. There's no accuracy in the stone or the plants. It's just kind of, this is kind of like what Da Vinci painted. The faces are different. There isn't the grace, the delicacy of expression in the faces. For me, the most obvious difference is when you look at baby Jesus. And the picture on the right, the one that the assistants did, somebody hit baby Jesus with an ugly stick. It's not working. And also, the colors of the skin. When someone talks about Da Vinci's delicate flesh tones, you're like, okay. But look at the difference. I mean, the one on the right, those people look like they died last week. It doesn't have the same sense of life and correct skin tone that Da Vinci manages to create. Da Vinci makes a masterpiece, and the masterpiece isn't in any dramatic details. It's in all the subtle differences, all of those finer things that Da Vinci successfully manages to pull off. Is there anything Da Vinci can't do? I've just gone on about what a genius he is, blah, 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 blah. Actually, Da Vinci does have one major weakness. For example, let me show you a picture Da Vinci did of John the Baptist. Now, this is John the Baptist. Now, for those of you who know who John the Baptist was in the Bible stories, you're twitching. Mostly because John the Baptist was a manly man, testosterone 101, ate bugs, wore animal skins, and Da Vinci paints him like this. You know that whole thing with not a true human beauty being neither male nor female? Yeah, that's that. There you go. My students a couple semesters ago actually labeled this Joan the Baptist because the facial features really did look girly to them. So what's this got to do with Da Vinci's single weakness? The one thing Da Vinci's not good at painting, and he knows he's not good at painting, are hands and wrists. This particular painting, Da Vinci does more than 50 practice sketches for that hand and wrist, and they appear incredibly prominent in this particular painting because Da Vinci has had to work so hard to make them look correct that he features them very prominently in the artwork. Now, if you know about Da Vinci, you probably know two pieces of Da Vinci's. You probably know this piece for one. This is Da Vinci's Last Supper. Da Vinci's Last Supper was a commission for a monastery, the monastery of Santa Maria delle Grazie. It was intended to go in basically their cafeteria, the monks' eating location, and it was intended to fill the end of the room. I wanted to give you this long shot of it so you could see how it fits into its location. At least for me, it doesn't look anything like I expected it to from seeing the smaller versions of it. It is located notably in Milan. Now, if you remember, clear at the beginning of the class when I talked about Florence, I told you that Florence was an arch enemy of Milan. Now, that goes back to Leonardo da Vinci being a very independent artist. Most of the other artists we've talked about who were patronized by the Medici family would never have worked for anyone from Milan. They would have stuck with Florence. Da Vinci's independent. Someone from Milan wants to hire him, in this case the Duke of Milan. Sure, that's fine. He goes and he works for them. In fact, at the top of the Last Supper, you'll see 3 lunettes, 3 half-moon shapes. All of them have shields in them. Those are identifiers for families, heraldic imprints. The center shield, the largest of the 3, is actually the shield representing the Duke of Milan, and that shows that he helped to fund this painting. One other minor detail here. There's a door right in the center of the painting, which may seem a little odd to you. When the painting was originally created, that door was not there. It was actually knocked through the wall much later. Originally, Jesus did have feet, but whoever decided they needed a door there decided Jesus did not need feet, so they just went ahead and put a door through there. The painting itself is probably one of the best-known artworks in Western history. It's huge, for the record. It's 28 feet, almost 29 feet, by a little over 15 feet high. The painting is absolutely beautiful in its organization. It portrays the moment in the Bible story of the Last Supper, where Jesus has just announced to his followers that one of them is a traitor and one of them will betray him. This throws the apostles, his followers, into complete confusion. They all immediately begin whispering to one another, trying to figure out who the traitor actually is going to be. Jesus, however, sits in the center of the table, completely calm and unmoved, representing his knowledge, stability, and power. Da Vinci paints this, again, with mathematics behind it. Da Vinci loves math. Da Vinci knows that there are 12 followers of Jesus, 12 disciples, so he puts Jesus right in the middle of the table, and then he divides the followers in half, 6 on one side, 6 on the other side. He then wants to make even those 2 divisions balanced, so he divides each group of 6 into 2 groups of 3. So you have 4 groups of 3 apostles each, and then Jesus in the center. Then, in order to balance out the overall image, Da Vinci actually creates a series of triangles. Jesus is the central triangle. You can see the triangle shape centered on his head. Then you will see the disciples on each side. Each group of 3 is divided out into a triangular shape. This mathematical organization balances everything, and then Da Vinci adds on top of that a series of lines which direct the viewer to focus on Jesus at the center of the painting. You can see here that all of the lines from the ceiling to the tops of the doorway all bring your focus to center on Jesus' head. Da Vinci actually ensured that this effect was going to work correctly by actually pounding a nail into where Jesus' head was to be. He then pounded nails into the edges of the ceiling and put pieces of string from one edge to the other so that he could paint along those straight strings to ensure that all of the lines of sight led the viewer directly to Jesus at the center. This painting was originally commissioned as a fresco. Remember, that's the type of painting where they use the limestone and heat it up and then powder it and then wet it, put it back on the wall. You paint on it while it's damp, and then when it dries, the paint is stuck into the wall. It's definite, it requires quick work, has no room for being wishy-washy, for correction, or for making mistakes. This is Leonardo da Vinci. The guy who comes and cries for 2 weeks because he's in his other half of his creative cycle, and then he wants to go back in and change and fix what he was working on several weeks ago. Da Vinci was not going to do well with fresco, and he knew it. So Da Vinci, being a genius, came up with a new method of painting that involved an egg-based paint on dried plaster. It was an innovative idea. Unfortunately for everyone involved, it was an epic fail. This is a close-up of part of the painting here. And you see all that brown splotchy stuff? Yeah, that's the wall behind where the painting's supposed to be. The paint has literally peeled off the wall in those spaces, and there's very little of the original paint left. When I show you pictures of the Last Supper and they all look fuzzy, the reason that they look fuzzy and out of focus is not because I'm using crappy pictures. It's because there is actually that little paint left on the wall. This decay process actually started back when Leonardo da Vinci was painting this thing. It started before he was done painting, honestly. And da Vinci, therefore, almost immediately had people coming in and trying to repair his work. The Last Supper was repaired numerous times over the years, and you can see in the top picture what it looked like after all of those repairs. However, scholars and historians knew that a lot of it was just a matter of repainting, redoing what was already there. And in some cases, the repainting had actually screwed up Da Vinci's original. So a group of scientists in the 90s actually got together, and they chose to restore Da Vinci's Last Supper. They got a bunch of scaffolding, they got tweezers, and they got chemical analysis equipment. They took every single flake of paint off the wall, one flake at a time, and analyzed every single one of them. They were checking to see if they were Da Vinci's original paint mixture or somebody else's. If they were Da Vinci's original paint mixture, they returned the flake of paint to the wall using archival glues. If they were not Da Vinci's original chemical paint, they removed it from the wall, leaving only Da Vinci's original paint behind. No. In case you were wondering, no, these scientists have no life. None whatsoever. Okay? They spent almost 10 years doing it, and when you see the bottom picture, you get to see what their repairs actually revealed. There's a number of interesting differences between the two, several of which caused major upsets because people had actually written and interpreted things in the Last Supper in everything from textbooks to TV shows, you name it. Some of those things, like for example, see that half circle thing, that lunette over the door? When you look at that in the top one and then you look for it in the bottom one, you're going to see that's not Da Vinci. People had actually written about Da Vinci putting that in as a sort of a halo, symbolic halo for Jesus. It's actually not there, which humiliated a lot of people. There are other details that the restoration actually fixed and showed us that Da Vinci was really as smart as we thought he was. For example,